Hello and welcome to Politics Today, right here on Channels Television. I'm Jeffrey Uzanga. Now, it's all smiles for Governor Umaru Fintiri of Adamawa State as the appeal court has affirmed his victory in the April supplementary governorship election. He has dismissed the APCs Benani's appeal against him. As the year winds down, Senate Appropriation Committee gives a 48-hour deadline to standing committees for the presentation of their various reports in order to facilitate passage of the 2024 budget. Welcome to the program. We're reaching you live from our global headquarters right here in Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga. Now, it's just a new week, and we're gradually heading to the peak of the Yuletide and approaching a new year, 2024. The question is, how are you preparing, and how are you holding up against surging inflation standing at 28%? Well, whilst you're at 8, our responsibility is to help you track the polity on what's happening, where and when, which is why we can tell you that a court of appeal has affirmed the victory of Umaru Fintiri of the People's Democratic Party as the governor of Adamawa State after dismissing the appeal of Aishatu Benani of the All Progressives Congress for lacking in merit. In a judgment prepared by Justice Tunde Awotoye and read by Justice Ebiowe Itobi, the appellate court also awarded the cost of 500,000 naira in favor of Fintiri and the PDP against Benani. The appellate court frowned at the premature announcement of election outcome by the resident electoral commissioner, Mr. Buhari, adding that Benani's appeal was plagued by several demons. Those were their words. The court stressed in strong terms that the action of the resident electoral commissioner in announcing Benani as the winner was illegal and an action outside of that prescribed by law, as only the returning officer has such powers. This judgment affirms the decision of the tribunal on October the 28th, which dismissed the petition of Benani for failing to prove allegations of overvoting by not tendering documents to prove our case, faulting the outcome of the election.
The issues were clearly identified and addressed by the court in its judgment. So both on the technical level and on the merits, it is our humble view that this court has done justice to the petition that was submitted, the issues that were formulated, and the ultimate decision by the Court of Appeal is consistent with our law in Nigeria today as we know it. On the rec, if you listen to the judgment, the court was very emphatic. The competent official with the power to announce the result of an election is a returning officer. So when a rec decides to go far beyond his authority and to go and make an announcement, what the rec did was not a declaration. You make a declaration when you have the legal authority and power to make the declaration.
I represented my party, APC, at the judgment of the Court of Appeal today. Yes, quite unfortunate, the judgment is not favorable to our party, but just as you know, these are intermediate courts. We have the right to appeal to the Supreme Court. We're going to study the judgment, and upon study of the judgment, we are going to get advice from our lawyers and see what our next possible line of action we want to take about the judgment.
Well, the lawyers are not the only ones that have been reacting to that judgment. The governor himself, Umaru Fintiri, has also spoken. Let's take a listen to him.
We didn't expect that we would come this far because the election was free and fair. It was squarely defeated, and there shouldn't have been any issue. But you know, politicians, being what they are, we're here, and the court has further reaffirmed because that is their responsibility. And I'm happy for that. I'm gratitude to them, because they've done what they're supposed to do. They've given judgment to whom deserves the judgment.
Away from that, the Senate Committee on Appropriation has given the chairman of standing committees of the upper chambers 48 hours within which to submit their budget reports to the appropriation panel. That's to facilitate the speedy passage of the 2024 budget proposal latest December the 31st. The chairman Senate Committee on Appropriation, Senator Adiola Lamilekon, announced the deadline whilst receiving reports which trickled in a week after the Secretariat officially opened for submission. He explained that refusal to submit the requisite report by Wednesday, which is just 48 hours from now, December the 20th, the panel will be empowered to go ahead with the executive session. Meanwhile, on the likelihood on presenting an increased version of the proposed budget to the executive, given a number of concerns over limited budget allocation, the chairman says it might be preemptive to do so. The actual figure, he says, will be made known after the collation of reports. Let's now head to River State's stories coming in from there. We understand right now, stories coming in, that the President, Bola Tinubu, is meeting with stakeholders from River State at the presidential villa, Abuja. Governor Siminalayi Fubara is the one that led the team from River State. The stakeholders include the former governor of the state, Dr. Peter Odili, and some traditional rulers of the state. It was learned that the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory and former governor of the state, Nyesom Wike, is also expected to be present at this meeting. The meeting may not be unconnected with the political crisis that has rocked the state over the past few days. We understand also that the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and the Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila, are all part of this particular meeting. Now, we're not done with talking with River State. Now, the Speaker, Edison, the Edison-led group of the House of Assembly, has asked the Independent National Electoral Commission to conduct by-elections to replace the 25 lawmakers whose seats he declared vacant. Mr. Ahie made the request in a letter to INEC dated 14 December 2024. He titled it Notice of Vacancies in the River State House of Assembly and Request for Conduct of Fresh Elections in the 25 state constituencies in the River State House of Assembly. Mr. Ahie did list out the 25 lawmakers and their constituencies who he says have vacated their seats. He also instructed the Accountant General of the state to suspend the payment of their salaries and emoluments of the former lawmakers. But Justice Donatus Okorowo of the Federal High Court, Abuja, has barred the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, from organizing by-elections to replace the lawmakers of the River State House of Assembly whose seats were declared vacant. Justice Okorowo also barred the defendant in the case from interfering with the 27-member camp of the River State House of Assembly from conducting their legislative duties as Speaker, Deputy Speaker, and members of Parliament. The judge restrained the Inspector General of Police and the SSS from denying or refusing to provide security to the 27 members or withdrawing their security details. He subsequently adjourned the suit to December the 28th for a hearing. Meanwhile, the Rivers Elders and Leaders Forum said today's ex parte order issued by the Federal High Court sitting in Abuja is a setback. Those were the words to the piece they've been working hard to broker amidst the rocking political crisis. While briefing journalists in Port Harcourt today, in reaction to that judgment, the chairman of the forum and former governor of the state, Chief Rufus Adda-George, read out a communique reached after the emergency meeting held last night. Whilst calling for peace from both parties, Chief Adda-George lamented the continuous heating up of the polity of the state through attempt to allegedly impeach Governor Siminalayi Fubara, which he feels disappointed in maintaining that the Rivers people will resist such attempt.
That judgment has been floating all over River State. How can a judgment of a high court, non-ruled, be known and seen by a lot of people before this time? So that gave us a lot of concern, and that we highlighted it in this press statement. And unfortunately, that judgment was delivered as we read it, and in the same fashion. So that gave us concern. But we are not lawyers. Most of us are not lawyers. We have to refer to the legal authorities to interpret and advise us on appropriate actions to take.
Well, if you've been following that, the last has not been heard. We'll continue to follow and bring you all of the details as much as possible. But for now, let's get to all the political stories across the country in our political roundup stories.
The chairman of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Chief Pius Akinyelure, has made clear the commitment of the board to ensure Nigeria achieves a product output of 2 million barrels per day from 2024. He said this while speaking with State House correspondents after President Bola Tinubu inaugurated the board in a ceremony at the State House. Chief Akinyelure and members of the board also said they will work with the management to turn around the fortunes of the company.
Our commitment is to produce at the rate of 2 million barrels per day anytime from next year. But to do this, we have to overhaul our security architecture.
The national chairman of the Action Democratic Party, ADP, Engineer Yabagi Sani, has attributed the forgery of his signature on a document announcing the death of the party's 2023 House of Representatives candidate in Kano State to some party members. In a petition earlier submitted to the heads of security agencies, the party had accused two members of forging and presenting the death certificate of Musa Ali to the Independent National Electoral Commission in order to replace him. The national chairman confirmed that the suspected members involved in forging his signature have been arrested and are currently under investigation by the police.
The man also had the seal of the party and the signature of the secretary of the party. So he should apologize to us because he was not even a bona fide member of the party.
The speaker of the Edison Group in the Rivers State House of Assembly, Edison Ehie, has asked the Independent National Electoral Commission to conduct by-elections to replace the 25 lawmakers who defected from the PDP to the APC. He made the request in a letter to INEC dated 14th December 2023, titled Notice of Vacancies in the Rivers State House of Assembly, and requested for conduct of fresh elections in the 25 state constituencies in the Rivers State House of Assembly. It goes further to list the 27 lawmakers and their constituencies who he says have vacated their seats. He also instructs the Accountant General of the state to suspend the payment of their salaries and emoluments of the former lawmakers. Meanwhile, a group under the aegis of Ogba Egbema Ndoni Stakeholders Forum are throwing their support behind the Deputy Governor of the state, Professor Ngozi Odu. Speaking at a news conference in Onelga Council headquarters, the leader of the group, Mr. Isidore Wokocha, hailed the vacant declaration of the defecting lawmakers even as he called on INEC to conduct by-elections to replace them.
Onelga people will not and will never disrespect or disregard Rivers State government. We will fight with him till the end.
Nigeria's Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, has officially confirmed his return to the All Progressives Congress. The minister was received by the party leadership at the Oyo State APC Secretariat in Ibadan, the state capital, amidst cheers from his supporters. In his address to APC members at the event, the minister says the party remains one large, indivisible family, united in purpose.
We have come to the party to extend hands of fellowship, hands of reconciliation to those that remain in the party.
Let's now get into our conversation. So today, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, met with leaders of political parties at the Commission's headquarters in Abuja. The meeting is to review the conduct of those by-elections, or off-cycle elections, I should say, take observations from the political parties, but more importantly, to plan ahead for the by-elections and rerun to fill some seats in the national and state assemblies owing to either court judgment, death, or resignation. Now, about 34 constituencies across the country will hold these rerun elections, besides what may come out of cases still under adjudication. For instance, we're expecting to hear from the Supreme Court. INEC chairman further said that he will provide details of all this, but the commission is hoping to hold those elections sometime in February next year, which is less than 3 months from now. So that will be the basis of our conversation as we look at election management and the Electoral Act. So you can clearly see on your screen members of IPAC, leaders of political parties in that particular meeting, which I said is going to be the basis of our conversation. I'm being joined on the program as we talk about election management and the Electoral Act by the Executive Director of YAGA Africa, Mr. Samson Itodo, is joining us via Zoom from California in the U.S. Mr. Itodo, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much, and compliments of the season.
Absolutely. And in our Abuja studios, we have Mr. Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program, as always.
It's a pleasure, Jeffrey. Compliments of the Utah.
Compliments, same to you as well. So, Mr. Samson, let me come to you straight up. Sometimes we mix these things. So let's begin with a bit of education here to separate, because when I was reading the statement from INEC, I clearly saw that they try to explain what it is. But for the benefit of the audience, for those who may be mixing something for the other, let's be clear on what a rerun is, a by-election is, possibly a supplementary election is, before we go to the meat of the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. I have read a statement issued by INEC concerning by-elections or rerun elections. So when a rerun is ordered, a rerun is a court-ordered election. It's an election that is sanctioned by a court of law. And what it simply says is, hey, INEC has conducted elections. There have been some infractions after careful adjudication of a petition presented to the Electoral Commission and presented to the courts, I beg your pardon. And the courts have discovered that there were some gaps or some issues, and the court orders a rerun in that particular election. And often a rerun might be ordered in a number of polling units or a number of constituencies. And in this particular case, the court has ordered that INEC should go back and rerun elections in those selected constituencies. Now, for by-elections are conducted by INEC. So INEC sanctions by-elections. And a by-election is conducted when there is a vacancy in a particular office that was occupied by someone who, by reason of death, no longer occupies that position, or by resignation. So INEC is required by the Constitution to conduct by-elections to elect another person to replace that person who has either died or resigned from that particular position. And like we are witnesses to the fact that there are some individuals who were successful in the 2023 elections, who have passed on either at the state houses of assembly or at the National Assembly. And that's the reason why we are going to have these elections, like INEC mentioned, in February next year.
Let me come to you, Ms. Ojo. Two elections are occasioned by either the court order or death, as explained by Mr. Itodo. They said that they have 34 reruns, 1 senatorial, 11 federal constituencies, and 22 state constituencies. They say 3 cases, according to them, INEC will conduct elections in all the constituencies, and 31 in new or few PUs. INEC says this rerun accounts for, in their words, 2.8% of about over 1,000 litigation. So when I saw them putting those numbers and the statistics, when you look at 2.1 of the over 1,000 litigation, is INEC just reporting data or simply saying, you guys should cut us some slack at least?
Thank you very much, Geoffrey. Compliments of the Utah, and congratulations to Channels TV on the winning of the 16th National Media Merit Award yesterday in Lagos.
Thank you for your kind word. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Awesome. And I really do appreciate the management and staff for that yeoman's job. Having said that, the issue is this. As against the grain of public opinion about 2023 general elections, it's in order for INEC to put it out there that there are 1,191 litigations, post-election litigations here. Because, Jeffrey, what we need to understand is that there is pre-election litigations and post-election litigations. The pre-election litigations are usually arising from party nomination process, issues that arose from party primaries and nominations. Those ones are pre-election litigations. So INEC is reporting that out of all of the 1,900 plus elections that it held between February, March, and April, only 1,191 went to court. And out of this 1,191, only 34 had issues. Not even 34 having issues, because like you said, there is one senatorial elections, the 11 federal constituency, and then 22 state constituencies where there are issues. And for those who the court has said they should have rerun, it's only in 3 constituencies where they have to rerun the election in the entire constituency. In 31 out of those constituencies, it's just like maybe in some few polling units here and there. And that means, as against the naysayers that says the 2023 general election was the worst in the history of Nigeria, the facts and data and statistics does not support that. Because what the court has done is to review the election and deem that INEC substantially complied with the law in conducting this election. Having said that, that still does not erase in the minds of people who may have witnessed electoral infractions one way or the other. And there is one that is particularly rankling, that raised in mind, which is the issue of the Adamawa reg, which the court spoke about in today's judgments in the Adamawa governorship appeal court judgment, where it said that Barrister Yunusa Hari, the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State, has no business, hijacking the functions of the returning officer by making that pronouncement. Those are the kind of characters that give the electoral management body a bad name, because you cannot, it has gone down in history that example will continually be cited as one of the dents, one of the minuses of 2023 general elections. But by and large, let's hope at the end of the day, we can still have an holistic view of whatever happens, because the jury is still out there. Several governorship elections that went to Supreme Court will still have to be decided maybe before the end of the year or latest in January next year. And then we will have a holistic picture of what actually transpired in 2023 general elections.
All right, Mr. Itodo, let me come to you. Apparently, Mr. Ojo has spoken to the facts as presented by INEC. So let's take it back to the elections in Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo states, vis-a-vis what happened in the general election. Do you think that there were significant lessons learned and improvement? Because there are certain things I want to bring out from what they said and from the Electoral Act that I want us to examine. But quickly, since they listed out what number of litigations as well as the percentage in terms of performance, let's quickly look at the performance in terms of Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo.
I think before we look at Bayelsa and Imo, I agree with the data released by INEC. And if you have about 700 and something cases, dismissed, the fundamental question to ask is, were these cases dismissed on the merits? Or we can attribute that to the level of judicial corruption. We are all witnesses to the fact, and it's in the public domain, where the issue about conflicting judgments, the issue about procured judgments, in fact, one of our most celebrated legal icon, Olisa Abakoba, a few days ago, expressed his disappointment with the judiciary. Justice Detijo, in his valedictory remark, also alluded and expressed heartbreak with the state of the judiciary. So I really want to question the fact that, that figure for dismissed cases, if we take a closer look and look at those cases, we will find that there are some cases that were dismissed because of certain underhand and certain corrupt practices. I think the other point about the cases that were withdrawn, yes, to a large extent, some might have been withdrawn as a result of lack of merit. I totally agree. But I really want us to not divorce the fact that there are other political economy issues or other exogenous issues that may be responsible for the current data that we have. So I don't really think that that is a true reflection of the state of play. But if you look at the lessons, Kogi and Bielsa, it is expressly clear that if there's one lesson that we have learned from these elections, is the need for attitudinal reform on the part of a political class. And the one statement that the political class have made to Nigerians is that you can have the best of the laws. You can even have an independent electoral commission that is professional in its planning and execution of elections. If politicians don't change their attitude, if they continue to believe that this game is a zero-sum game and it's the do-or-die affair, they will subvert the process. Because how do you explain a situation where there were pre-filled result sheets in the recent elections that was conducted? That's result sheets, polling units level result sheets were available, were ready before voters went to the polling units to vote at elections. That, for me, is a big threat, to credible elections. And the nation needs to rise in condemnation of this and ensure that this is not swept under the carpet, because it's gradually, if we're not careful, it will become the norm in the course of the management of elections. The other critical issue, it's about the beavers. Politicians have now come to accept the fact that this device is a game changer. It limits multiple voting. It limits voting by proxy. And what they have now employed is beavers bypass, because they know how powerful this tool is in ensuring integrity of the process. But what you see is this constant attempt to undermine the process. So when we think about reforms and bigger lessons, we need to speak to our political class on the need for them to change their attitude towards elections. We need laws, that limit the excesses of individuals who want to subvert the process. But like it's often said, you cannot legislate attitude. We have to constantly demand, integrity from our politicians and for them to comply by the rules of the game. I think the third biggest lesson is that the Electoral Commission, the independence of INEC should not and cannot be negotiable. We have to protect the independence of INEC, and it's operational independence. The caliber, the competence, the integrity of the people who are appointed into INEC is critical for guaranteeing the success or the credibility of elections moving forward.
Let me come to you, Mr. Ojo. He's raised some very strong issues. I want to toe that line. Now, apparently, we're talking about reviewing the Electoral Act already. And he's been able to explain what he thinks about some of the things that are coming out of our courts and the things that happened, especially in places like Kogi, which is why some people are saying in reviewing the Electoral Act, the burden of proof should strongly move to the Electoral Commission. Do you agree?
Well, we need to hurry slowly because I think what Samson said, which is very instructive, is about the attitude of the political class, the Machiavellian principle that they deploy of the end justifying the means and doing everything humanly possible to subvert the process. Even where you have the burden of proof shifting to INEC, this species of political class can still manipulate that process to favor them. We all jubilated what time last year? It was February 25, 2022, that President Muhammadu Buhari signed the Electoral Act into law. And I was one of those who lauded that move because we felt that the law has now given us technological advancements to support the conduct of election. We all applauded it. There were so many reforms in the Electoral Act. But what have we seen in 2023? We have seen the subversion of these technological devices. We have seen how they have been aided and abetted by the courts, dwelling very much on technicalities. And I must say, very quickly, that I do not have evidence of corruption in judiciary. I know in time past there have been judges that have been dismissed or recommended for retirement, compulsory retirement, as a result of them meddling in election dispute resolution. But lawyers will tell you very quickly that what the court rules over is the facts before it. It does not necessarily mean the truth. There's a word of difference between the truth and the fact. The fact is what is before the court. The truth is known to those who committed the offenses. So whether we shift the burden to INEC, now that the political class are populating INEC with their loyalists, we know, and I think Yaga Africa is one of those CSOs that have gone to court to compel the presidency to review the appointments of some of the resident electoral commissioners who are said to be card-carrying members and sympathizers of political parties. I think about 2 of the newly inaugurated resident electoral commissioners were fingered to have partisan interest. Now, just imagine, Jeffrey, if you have a populated, an INEC that is already captured by the political class, and you now have the law saying the burden of proof should shift to INEC, they will filibuster. They will find one creative way or the other that will make the law not to work. Because as soon as, we have timelines for these old processes. Remember what happened after the Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo election? Many of the petitioners, or some of the petitioners, let me put it that way, were marching on INEC premises demanding for materials, election materials, to help them put their petitions together, because the petitions have to be filed within 21 days. And where the commission did not make those things available, the thing becomes status bad if you cannot file in your petition at the appropriate time. So a lot of technicalities will still come into play. But it is good to have a dry run, to have a trial of shifting the burden of proof to INEC. Let's see whether it will bring about better credibility and integrity in their electoral process. But I seriously have concern about the character and attitude of the current species of our political elite, who stops at nothing, who does not brook, whatever. You cannot stand up to them. They crush you. If they cannot induce you to do their bidding, they will crush you. We've had lives lost in the course of conducting elections. We've had petitions. You saw what happened in the case of Kogi, where in the course of bringing the petition, from what I read, trying to bring the petition from Lokoja to Abuja, the secretary to the petition committee was attacked, and petitions were destroyed. So what will you rely on to prove your case? I'm just like that instance. Nobody knew who was behind that attack. We saw the residents of Kogi, resident electoral commissioners attacked, and it was only saved by the military. Maybe he will have been a dead man by now if those attackers have succeeded after raising his house. So a lot of threats to democracy is now afloat, and we need to show concern. Electoral reform is just not about legal or administrative reforms. It's attitudinal reform. We must have tolerance. Professor Claudake of blessed memory said many decades ago in his classic work that we run democracy without Democrats. We must have democracy, and we must have Democrats running democracy for election to work.
All right. Let me come to you, Mr. Samson. Now, you've mentioned a few, and Mr. Ojo has also mentioned the fact that, of course, this is a zero-sum game. And is it fair to just assume that some members of the political class will never change? So we'll begin to think of the electorate and how to make sure their votes count and they are well respected at the polls at the end of the day. So you've talked about Beavers bypass, attitudinal change that is a long shot for some of them. And we've also noticed as well that there is, in the Electoral Act, INEC has indemnified itself. So what some of this political class do is that they go cause violence so that, because INEC say if there's violence, they have a right to cancel the election. So if an opponent is strong in an area, they go there, cause violence, and that result is gone. And then we are seeing another dimension that happened in Kogi pre-field election. Initially, it was more like chase them away, fill it within the boundaries of what is in the Beavers. As far everybody wants to see what's in the Beavers, okay, no problem. And from EC8A, we'll make sure that it's within the limit of those who are registered at that polling unit. So it looks like the more we move, the more these guys are moving, the more the system is trying to adjust to them. So where does this leave all of us to safeguard and protect democracy for the interests of the people, assuming the political class refuses to change?
Well, that's a very complex question. If the political class refuse to change their attitude. And first, there has to be a national consensus about what we want from democracy and the kind of nation that we desire. And the kind of nation that we desire, in my estimation, in my view, and interacting with citizens, is one that upholds and respects the rule of law. Because we can't claim to be a constitutional democracy, and then the principles of constitutionalism do not shape how we administer public affairs. Rule of law is a critical principle of what? Of democracy. So we expect that political leaders, and including citizens, would have respect for the rule of law. And where there is abuse of the rule of law, there have to be accountability mechanisms and institutions that limit the excesses or the expression of deviant behavior on the part of political class. And this is where things like the judiciary plays a critical role. And this is why Nigerians are frustrated and are disappointed with some of the judges and the judgments that have come from our court. And there is no point romanticizing this conversation. As a law student, over a decade ago, or close to 2 decades ago, we were taught in school that the judiciary is the bastion of hope for the common man. Ask an average Nigerian who's out there on the street whether the judiciary is still the bastion of hope for the common man. No, because of several issues. Again, legal icons, and including justices of the Supreme Court, have expressed their own view, which aligns with, citizens' position. And so when you talk about accountability, the judiciary plays a critical role. But then there are issues relating to judicial independence, appointment of judges, inconsistencies in some of our laws. The second is about law enforcement and your criminal justice system. And to what extent are our insecurity institutions or law enforcement agencies independent to limit and sanction, the abuse of law or sanction impunity? If there is no consequence, for the kinds of impunity that we experience on a daily basis in our country, you would continue to see politicians disregard people, disregard the electorates, and then take actions because they believe that they cannot be held to account. And this is a role that citizens also have to play by being very vocal, by engaging the political process and placing the demands on the political class and our institutions to deliver, because you can't hold politicians to account if you don't have functional institutions. This is why we have to sustain, the advocacy for the independence of institutions. The discourse on the appointments of non-partisan individuals into INEC is situated within the context of building strong institutions that can address some of the gaps, some of the excesses that we see within our electoral process. You also have other agencies of protection within our democratic process. You have, for instance, you have the Human Rights Commission that protects and promotes human rights. You also have institutions like the Nigerian police that have prosecutorial powers when it comes to these issues. So when you think about our political class, there's a role for everyone to play, but the voters and citizens have a role to play. Folding our hands and not speaking about these issues would only extend the doomsday. And I hope that citizens take up the responsibility by asking the right questions and making noise to address this democratic question that we experience.
A very good place to conclude your thoughts. Thank you so much. But let me go quickly to Mr. Jide, just 10 seconds as quickly as possible. I understand we're totally out of time. I wouldn't want you not to have your last say on this. Just 10 seconds if you can, please, sir, so we can go for a break.
So the issue has been well articulated by Samson, but more importantly for me, citizen oversight. We need to oversee our democratic institutions. The political class are the ones that are even generating the bigger problems. We have not talked about the problem that the political class, the gatekeepers, the political party managers create with the kind of messy nomination process that they put up that has led to over 1,000 litigations that mess up the entire process, even for INEC. Look at the last election in Bayelsa. The decision on who is the candidate, governorship candidate of APC did not come until about 2 weeks to that election because of litigations arising from nomination. And you could see the amount of money that is also being used for delegates, to induce delegates for nomination forms and all of that. So we also need to beam our satellite on the political party managers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, joining us from our Abuja studios, as well as Mr. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa, who joined us from California in the United States. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on the program. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
When we come back, we'll talk about the Senate has actually given 48 hours to standing committees to submit their report to explore all of that vis-a-vis the state of the Nigerian economy. Join us again. Welcome back. It's still Politics Today right here on Channels Television. And for your information, Channels has again won the 16th NMMA Awards, and congratulations to all of us. I want to say big congratulations to the chairman and vice chairman of Channels Television, as well as the entire management and staff for this unprecedented, historic, not ever done in Nigeria wins ever. 16-time Channels Television is the station of the year 2023. So congratulations. And we couldn't have done this without you watching us from everywhere around the country and across the world. So thank you for always being with us on the program and across all our programs. Thank you so much. Let's now get to our conversation. My guest is joining me from Abuja, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you so much for coming on the program. As always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
You have a huge responsibility to, as quickly as possible, look at what is going on in Nigeria. There's a slang on the street that the Christmas is not Christmasing, looking at the inflation numbers on 28%. So maybe begin to address that first on the state of the economy.
Well, to be honest with you, if you look at the new inflation report, you see that inflation is highest in Kogi, Kwara, Lagos, and River State. Kogi has like 41.2% food inflation. Inflation is lowest in Borno and Bauchi. Food inflation, I mean. And the national average for food inflation is anywhere around 32.8%. And that's an increase from 31.3% in the month of November. And if you look at the headline inflation, it's actually highest in Kogi still. And you know what's interesting to me when you look at inflation numbers and you consider the fact that the basket for inflation is energy and food, you look at things like transportation, look at food prices, and look at the fact that even if the immediate past president removed railways from the exclusive to the concurrent legislative list, the Nigerian Governors Forum has still not come out with a template on how to devise a framework to build two major pillars that can really decentralize and accelerate economic growth across Nigeria. Railway infrastructure, not just vertical railway infrastructure running from the south to the north, because the British colonialists designed like a system for railway infrastructure to export and extract resources from Nigeria, but horizontal railway infrastructure, standard gauge, that goes from the east, cuts through the south to the west, you know, that can move food at a cheaper price and that can also move energy prices at a cheaper price. Because if you look at it, you'll see that, for example, in Lagos, petrol prices in some fueling stations go for between 585, 590, 595. But in the north, in Abuja here, NNPC stations sell at 617. Some parts of the northeast sells for above 650 naira, 660 naira per liter. It's a challenge of transportation and the fact that a lot of the transportation in Nigeria still relies on road and there is no railway infrastructure for cargo. Most of the bulk transport you see are not supposed to go by road, it's supposed to go by cargo. And with price of diesel at where they are, it's no surprise that you have inflation at where they are. Number two, you have the fact that today as we speak, and this is something I've always said, the MD of the Nigerian Ports Authority has the Calabar Deep Seaport. It has a channel draft of 6 meters because sand has washed up to the ports and Panamax ships cannot dock and they have to dock at the jetty mid-water and then bring in goods. And you have the fact that that port is suboptimal in functioning. And a lot of port traffic goes to Lagos. So you have the Tinkan, you have Apapa, you have Lekki Deep Seaport, but you don't have activity in the southeast and the south-south, you know, the eastern maritime flank. E&P, Port Harcourt Seaport, or Ness Deep Seaport, is designated as exploration and production. And the port categorization makes it more expensive for you to bring in other products apart from oil and gas, whether you're taking out or bringing in, through that port. So you need a holistic plan and framework for, number one, for transportation through railway infrastructure and for port operations across Nigeria. And I'll tell you what, you know, when Jonathan was president, he commissioned NIWA, Nigerian Inland Waterways Authority, to dredge the River Niger and see the possibility, create the feasibility of possibly building a seaport into Lokoja. And anytime I bring up this topic, people are always like, what is the feasibility? The Jebel Ali Seaport was dredged. You know, the Egyptians are now dredging, creating irrigation in a desert to increase the agricultural production and reduce food inflation in Egypt. So when Nigerians say that it's impossible to create and build a seaport in the north to serve 19 northern states in north central, northeast, and northwest, I don't know what you're talking about. For you to address inflation in Nigeria, it's both a supply side issue, a fiscal issue, and a monetary issue. You have the fact that today as we speak, there is scarcity of Naira notes across Nigeria. And the reason for that is because the Central Bank of Nigeria has increased its activities on using open money market operations to mop up cash and liquidity from the banking system. Because supply of cash is somewhere around 36%. You know, that alone cannot solve the problem of inflation in Nigeria.
Mr. Manuel, Mr. Kel, let's so that we can accommodate as much things as possible. I had to, when you mentioned Ministry of Transport, I had to look up the appropriation bill, 80 billion appropriated for it. And what you're saying, in essence, is maybe factor reasons that will eventually affect cost of production and all of that. So my natural question will be, when you look at the spending limit provided by the president, 27.5 billion, given the challenges you've raised, do you see that budget revamping the economy?
I don't see the budget revamping the economy. I mentioned yesterday when we spoke about the budget, I told you, I said, when you look at that budget, you see that the recurrent expenditure is very high, 9.9 trillion. The debt servicing is actually higher than the capital expenditure. How do you create a budget where you have zero capital expenditure and the fact that your revenue performance, is most likely not going to be above 50%? Because as we speak, I heard the Minister of Finance, Wale Edun, was talking to the National Assembly about revenue targets. And, it breaks my heart to see, for example, that, even if the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Reforms is working on harmonization of taxes, on ensuring that revenue collecting functions are collapsed into the Federal Inland Revenue Service, that Customs is actually at the National Assembly talking about collection of revenues. Customs is not supposed to be collecting revenues. Nigeria needs to ramp up its collection of revenues, both for non- and tax revenues. Egypt has tax revenue GDP ratio at somewhere around 22%. South Africa has it at somewhere around 18%, if I'm not mistaken. You need to rely more on revenues. You need to move your fiscal strategy paper away from debt to revenue. In 2014, Nigeria had a 16.8% debt financing structure in its revenue, in its fiscal strategy paper. Today, it's at 48%. In 2024, the Nigerian government is going to have to pay $1.2 billion in terms of debt servicing and refinancing costs to Eurobond creditors. You have different kinds of creditors in the Nigerian government. You have bilateral partners, you have Eurobond creditors, you have multilateral development banks, and then you have the domestic side. You have treasury bills, you have treasury government bonds, and all kinds of sukuk and the rest of them.
Mr. Manuel, sorry. I'm so sorry. I want to squeeze in one question so that I don't cut you again. But you have barely, maybe 30 seconds to wrap this up, because I understand we need to go on this particular one. So do you expect the National Assembly to review the budget upwards or downwards, in your view, if you were to ask them that, if they were to ask you that straight question?
Do I expect National Assembly to review the budget upwards? There's a revenue generation problem in Nigeria. Where are they going to raise 7.8 trillion naira? Yesterday I was trying to explain to you that the government needs to work at its government-owned enterprises to raise revenue. If you don't raise revenue, and if you can't borrow money because your debt financing costs are high, how do you fund the budget projections you have? The DG Budget Office is talking about the fact that when you look at the per capita of the entire budget size, it's still low compared to the fact that Nigeria is 219 million. And the question I have for the DG of the Budget Office is, what's your budget performance in terms of revenue? How are you going to fund 27.5 trillion? It's very good to talk about the estimates on expenditure. The question is, how are you going to finance it? That's the question.
Maybe we'll leave it at that question and begin to poke further to see what answers they will get. People like you are there to make sure these questions are asked so that we have a robust economy, because the president has said 10 years, 1 trillion naira, $1 trillion economy. Let's see how that plays out, which you disagree with, giving 3.6 as his first full year of budgeting. But thank you so much, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, an economist joining us from Abuja studios. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
As always, a pleasure. Well, that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time. And, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. God bless Nigeria. Good night.